Well, we're already a few weeks into the new year and it's time to check up on our resolutions. While I've already given up going to the gym and cutting back on my battery intake, this year I've decided to do the unthinkable, and that is getting rid of some of my pedals. Now I know that seems totally insane, especially coming from me, but hear me out. I have 6 gain pedals, 2 overdrives, 2 distortions, and 2 fuzzes, 4 of which are just mainstays on my board. I don't even know how I got to this point, but clearly it's a problem. It just seems so ridiculous since half of these pedals make the same exact sound. Hey, that might be a good idea for a video. Today I've decided to take a deep dive into all my gain pedals. My goal for today's video is to showcase the sounds of different pedals and how some pedals can overlap with each other sonically if you dial them in just right. In doing so, you can easily get by with just 1 or 2 gain pedals for a variety of different sounds without having to buy a whole new one. I'm also thinking at least one of them has to go, so I'll be making a mental note of which one will be eliminated. Place your bets now. We're starting off with a strong contender here, the Digitech Bad Monkey. To me, this pedal is the gold standard for every overdrive I encounter. It's no nonsense and it does the job exactly how I want it to. I wouldn't say the sound is particularly amazing or anything, but it doesn't really color the sound too much and it just works. I find this pedal to be pretty versatile because, and I will probably repeat this throughout the entire video, more knobs equals better. I know that's a silly thing to say, but hear me out. Generally, aside from volume and gain, many gain pedals will have just a simple tone knob. While this works perfectly fine, I think having an extra knob or two for the EQ really opens up possibilities to shape the sound exactly how you want it. For example, this pedal features low and high EQ knobs. They act pretty much how you would expect, with the low boosting or cutting the bass and the high boosting or cutting the treble. What I really like about this pedal is that the low end knob acts as sort of like a presence control, or at least that's how it feels to me. Boosting gives the sound a good amount of heft, especially for heavier tones, and cutting it will make it sound boxy like you're playing through a small speaker. It's also a pedal that has just amount of gain on tap to push it into Sabbath territory, which is an absolute must in my opinion. I love Black Sabbath and the Black Sabbath sound, and this pedal does it just fine. I must admit, one of the downsides of this particular pedal is it does sound a bit noisy when no sound is playing through it. It does have a noticeable buzzing on higher gain settings, which somewhat irks me, but not enough to stop me from using it. So how do I like this one? Well, it's a clon out of 10. I'm not getting rid of this pedal. It has become my personal favorite overdrive after I put it back on my board last year. Next! You would think after I said so many good things about the Bad Monkey that I would never think about replacing it, but the truth is I already have once. With this pedal. I was told it's a transparent overdrive, but I believe that to be a bold-faced lie. It is a hard clipping overdrive, certainly harder than the Bad Monkey, and as a result I think it sounds a bit harsher. I've also used this pedal in a ton of my solo recordings. It was my go-to overdrive from 2018 to 2023. Most notably, this is the pedal that I used to create the guitar tone for all of my Frenetic EP, as well as the most popular song on that EP, Manic. The nice thing about this pedal is it does have a lot of gain on tap, like well into distortion pedal levels of gain. Under most circumstances, I would deem this as a positive. However, this pedal is a bit weird and I feel like the tone control becomes absolutely useless at higher gain settings. If you have the tone from noon to maxed out, I don't really feel like the tonal aspect changes at all, which unfortunately feels like a hindrance because I feel like the pedal does get significantly muddy with the gain dime. It would be nice to have some additional control to cut the lows or something, but this is just the nature of the OCD. It does have this high gain, low gain switch, but I don't really feel like there's much difference at all, especially when it's cranked. If you're into sludgier overdrive sounds though, this is pretty good for that. The last thing I want to say about this pedal is it does the Sabbath thing well, and in fact it probably does it better than any pedal I own. I will will say that I do have a complicated relationship with this pedal. The reason why I have this pedal in the first place is after I got my Vox AC15, I didn't really know how to dial in the Bad Monkey to make it sound good through the Vox. The internet led me to believe that the Bad Monkey would just never sound good through the Vox because of its EL84 tubes, so I ended up getting this as a replacement for that. Suffice to say, I've never really had a strong attachment to this pedal in particular. I think that it's a good pedal and it achieves the sounds that I strive for, but nothing more. Obviously, that's just my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of people love the sounds that I just played with this pedal. Let's move on to the distortion pedals. For those who don't know, this pedal is a clone of a Marshall Shredmaster. I've received a few questions asking if this is related to the Jekyll and Hyde pedal by Fulltone, and it is indeed. This is just the Hyde side, or the distortion side of that pedal in its own enclosure. I had actually contemplated getting the Jekyll and Hyde, but since I already had the Bad Monkey, it would just basically mean that the Jekyll side would be useless because they're both the same thing, which is a Tube Screamer clone. All that aside, this pedal sounds fantastic, easily one of my favorite distortion pedals I've ever played by a long shot. Its tones are phenomenal, and it perfectly captures the distortion sounds I imagined in my head. You can really do no wrong in how you set it because there's just so much goodness in this pedal. As I said before, more knobs the merrier, and this pedal is no exception. It has the same controls as an actual Shredmaster with a 3-band EQ, along with this bright switch and an internal noise gate. The bass pot is also internal, and for some reason it's maxed out straight from the factory. When I first got this pedal, I rolled it back to about halfway, and I haven't touched it since. In fact, I'm afraid of touching it again for fear of losing all the magic that's contained in this pedal. Because it has a lot of different controls, you can use it in all sorts of situations. Say cranking the gain and cutting the mids to create a really solid thrash metal tone. But say you're not a big thrash metal fan, you can easily restore the mids to create the perfect Van Halen style lead. Of course, this pedal does not miss a beat when creating some of Radiohead's sounds, as I originally bought it because Johnny uses an actual Marshall Shredmaster. Cranking the mids will help achieve this. Hell, just crank everything and you get into fuzz territory. Or maybe you find that it's all a bit too much. Just roll back the gain and create a solid boost or overdrive sound. Of course, we might as well check the Sabbath thing. I think it does it pretty well, but it's slightly too gainy at times. It kind of matches better with some of Tony Iommi's live tones, I think. I think it's fairly evident how versatile this pedal is. I've played with a lot of different pedals that do a lot of different things moderately well, but in the case of this pedal, I think it does a lot of different things very well. In my opinion, this pedal is king, and in fact, as soon as I finish recording the video, I'm going to weld it to my pedal board because I'm confident it's the only dirt pedal I'll ever need. Next! If you ask me, I think this pedal gets hated on too much by people who have no clue how to dial it in. It's a great pedal, and it might not be intuitive at first, but I think with a little finesse, you can easily create some of the sounds that I just created with the Son of Hyde. We'll start off with some light overdrive. See, in my opinion, people don't know how to set the tone knob on these things. There's so many demos out there that are like, alright, we're starting off with all the controls at noon. But all the controls at noon doesn't always sound good, and in my opinion, I think that sounds kind of awful for this pedal. The real honest-to-God tip that I have for dialing in your pedals is just using your ear to find the right sounds. Or in layman terms, what sounds good. Play with the pedal, turn things, experiment with what the knobs do, that's what they're there for after all. I've seen a lot of videos recently on the intended use of this pedal and how it should be paired with a somewhat dirty amp to create a good metal sound. So what better time to test that theory than right now with some Sabbath? Of course, this pedal's biggest claim to fame is its tenure in Nirvana. You can easily create the perfect bleach tone by setting the tone to 11 and then cranking the volume and gain. And then you can just double track that for a good Nevermind sound. The last thing I'd like to show off with this pedal is a little trick I kind of discovered, which is using it in conjunction with a different pedal. You can create a kind of big muff type sound. In my case, I personally stack it with the Son of Hyde. It actually allowed for a lot of control with all the different knobs you could adjust, and it didn't have that wooliness that big muffs are known for, which allowed for a tighter response. Obviously, the downside when you stack any two gain pedals is that it's going to be noisy. Overall, I think this pedal is fine. It might have a bit of the OCD problem where the tone knob is only useful in certain ranges, and compared to the Shredmaster, it doesn't have as many tonal options, but I still think it's a good pedal. I have recommended this pedal in the past for beginners looking to get into gainier sounds. Its advantage is that it's not too complicated. For all my critiques of this pedal, it still happens to be a pedal that I can just sit down with for an afternoon and have a lot of fun, and I think there's something to be said for that. As for my purposes, it is the first pedal I ever owned, so I'm not really sure I can find it in my heart to get rid of it. I might take it off the board, but I'll still use it from time to time. Next! Okay, so this pedal is a bit complicated. It's a great pedal for sure, and it has so much character, but I personally found that you really have to adapt your playing to it if you want to use this pedal to its fullest extent. I would like to do a future video describing how to dial it in properly because it's certainly an interesting beast, but for now let's just get into it. It has 3 different modes, so let's start off with Fuzz 1. It's a sort of vintage sounding fuzz. Okay, so I'm not going to mince words here. This pedal is loud, like very loud. It reacts to every little detail and outputs it exponentially. You might think that's exactly what you want in a fuzz pedal, but here's where we run into the problem with this one. It does not separate the different strings very well. If you play more than one string that isn't really like a 5th chord, then everything just kind of blends in together like some giant audio deluge. What does sound great are single note solos and some power chords. Check it out. I do find the EQ on this pedal to be fairly useful. Like the Bad Monkey, it has a high and low EQ knob. A lot of the time I'll just crank the bass as high as possible, but you can cut it a bit by setting it to around 3 o'clock if needed. The treble is fairly useful too, but I don't really feel like any big adjustments for the EQ on this pedal will radically change the character of it. It's simply just a monster in a box. Now obviously one of its stronger features is that it's really great at creating the electric wizard sound. Just change it to fuzz mode too and then cover your ears. Obviously, it is a pedal that you can't really do the Sabbath thing with, but like wizard riffs, Sabbath riffs sound great through it. The last mode on this pedal is a boost feature, which also allows you to EQ it. It's perfect for giving your sound a bit of extra edge for solos, or just even to make it poke out in the mix just a little bit. I will say as a brief aside, you want to be careful if you get this pedal and you can't stomp on it too hard because it is totally made of plastic. I don't know if people are aware of that, but yeah, just as a side. Now the real question is, do I like it? I've said it before, it's certainly a specialty effect, and seeing as it's simply a Boss Hyperfuzz for so dang cheap, I don't really consider it a poor investment in the slightest. However, I don't really see it being on my board long term unless I really want to exclusively play doom metal. The boost feature is nice though. Moving on. Wait a minute, I don't have a big muff. After a year since I sold my last big muff, I finally decided I couldn't live without it, so here we are. This Ram's Head version is the newest addition on my board, and I think it's very interesting. It is slightly more contained than the old big box New York version that I had, but somehow I think it sounds even better. It still retains that signature muff sound without sounding too harsh, but you can still easily attain that harshness if need be. I used my old big muff on a lot of earlier recordings and demos, and naturally this pedal does not skip a beat when recreating those sounds. You can easily get a doom tone out of this thing by cranking all the knobs and adjusting the tone knob to taste. of the coolest settings you can use with a Big Muff is cranking the sustain but rolling off your guitar's tone knob, similar to how an EBow sounds. Lastly, of course, we gotta check the Sabbath thing. Although I might argue that the Big Muff doesn't really recreate the finer details of the Sabbath sound, I'd argue that the character of this pedal does a great job at recreating that sort of style and feel. Obviously, I think it's a wonderful dirt pedal, but there are a couple drawbacks. Like with all Big Muffs, it's sludgy. Of course, that's the type of thing you come to expect when it comes to this pedal. However, if you're someone that wants it to react on a dime to your playing, this might not be the type of pedal for you. It's kind of woolly and boomy, so whatever you play into it blends together in some capacity. You can easily rectify it a bit by turning up the tone knob, but then you might kind of change the character of the sound too much. Again, that's just the sound of this particular pedal, and you should be aware of that if you're going to buy one. Personally, I love to use it for solos or just riffs and chords that I know will end up a bit on the noisy side. It's such a great in-your-face pedal that you definitely have to use it appropriately. So how do I like it? Well, obviously I just got it, so I'm not going to get rid of it anytime soon. I think it's fantastic. It's a Big Muff. What more could you ever need in terms of fuzz? And the results are in. Of course, I love all my pedals, but I think if I was going to get rid of one of them, it'd probably be the OCD. Of course, that's just my opinion and I'm basing it off of my own personal experience, but it still is a fantastic pedal. The thing is, yeah, you can always use EQ to your advantage and pretty much achieve a wide variety of sounds given the right amount of volume and gain. But of course, we all have our preferences, and sometimes the best, most fun gain pedals you can play are not the ones that you can create a variety of different sounds with, but the ones that simply just sound good to us, and that's fine. I think that would certainly explain why I ended up with so many gain pedals in the first place. Ultimately, I think it's okay to let one go. Life's too short, and the funds from this pedal can be put towards other gear I don't already have. I don't really know when I'll sell it. There are still video ideas I kind of have for it, so don't go scouring Reverb or anything looking for this specific one. There's certainly more content to come, so please stay tuned for that. But until then, thank you very much for watching. Please leave suggestions and thoughts about this video or things you would like to see in future videos in the comments below. As always, you can support me on Ko-Fi as well as check out some of my original music on Bandcamp, Spotify, Apple Music, etc. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.